I think everyone has an opinion of USC. I want yours tonight. I want to talk about the best case, the worst case, and the actual most likely record for USC this year. I think the expectation scale got kind of badly out of whack with Lincoln Riley, and by that I mean forget about what you think about Lincoln Riley, forget about what you think about that USC logo. Just picture a generic team for a second. And if I told you that team has national championship potential as a program, but lately they've gone 5-7, 8-5, 5-1, COVID year, 4-8, and then fill in the blank. If I told you the next record was 11-3, 11-1 in the regular season, what would you think? You would think a phenomenal job had just been done. Well, that is USC right now. And that was Lincoln Riley's year one. He rebuilt the roster in the span of one spring, essentially, and they went 11-1, and then they lost the Pac-12 championship game, and then they lost to Tulane in a bowl game. And folks called it a failure. Now, I'm not telling you most folks did. I'm saying there are some on the periphery, some on the fringe out there who laughed at him. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? He is where he probably was expected to be in year 2 or year 3 in year 1. So now we get the fun task of figuring out how good could it be this year. Well, the best case record scenario for USC this year is 12-0 because they may be favored in every game they play. Now, that is way up in the air right now. So we look at that beautiful sunset. Wow. So we were looking at some of the projected point spreads for USC. They go to Notre Dame. They are currently about a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite in that game. That is October 14th. They go to Oregon, second to last week of the year. Actually, it's the third to last week for everyone else, but USC's done after the 18th. So they go to Oregon, second to last week of the year. They're currently either a 1 point favorite or a 1 point dog, depending on which sportsbook you're looking at. They're a 6 point favorite at home against Washington. They're a 6.5 point favorite at home against Utah. They're a 12.5 point favorite at home against UCLA. So a lot of competitive games, at least from an odds maker's perspective, expected. This is mostly about their defense, though. If they win all these games, if they go 12-0 regular season, it didn't cause a Caleb Williams doing anything more than we've seen him do because what he's already done is enough. But when you benefit from the best turnover luck in the sport, and you still end up 94th in points per game allowed, that is horrifically bad defensively. If they could just do me a favor and jump into the top 50 this year with those newly acquired pieces on the defensive line, that would be wonderful. Do you hear me? I'm just asking top 50. Coach Grinch, top 50, please. They go 12-0 if that happens. Now, what most of you probably tuned in for is the next segment, the worst case scenario. I thought about this for a second because I kind of flip-flopped several times between two records. I think the worst case for this year for USC would be 8-4. I flirted with 7-5. I went 8-4. And basically my mind goes back to what if they aren't better defensively? What if they aren't better? So combine not really improving a whole lot defensively with just not having the turnover luck. If you just did those two things, if they only have a moderate improvement defensively, but they're not plus 1 million in turnover rate, that alone could lose you 3 or 4 games. You heard me say how close odds makers expect those games to be. What if their portal acquisitions on the interior of the offensive line don't quite work out? What if the league matches up with them a little bit better when it comes to quarterback play? You don't have another Caleb Williams out there, but you got a lot of pretty good quarterbacks. And if they get to go against a USC defense that is still sucking water through a garden hose, they don't have to be as good as Caleb Williams to match numbers. They could lose 4 games out there, I think, in the worst case, if nothing were to go right. And that's not even considering what injury could do to you. So what's the most likely record? The most likely record for USC this year, I think, is 10-2. Their over-under's 9.5, so the over would hit here. Jesse wanted to go 11-1. I'm almost there. I'm not quite there. Now, if someone listens to me say 10-2, your natural reaction should be, wait a second. We went 11-1 last year. You're expecting us to regress? I'm actually not. I'm not expecting you to regress. I don't think USC will be a worse team this year. You got to understand what that turnover luck did for you last year. And what just having even numbers in the turnover battle and having the same team, or maybe even a little bit better team, does to a normal season. By the way, the back half of their schedule at Notre Dame, Utah, at Cal, Washington, at Oregon, UCLA. They play all the best teams on the back end. So it's tough for me to see that best case panning out. Now, 11-1 gets them everything they need. But if I'm playing this thing out 1,000 times, I think there's more 10-2 in there than 11-1. Unless they've improved more than I think they have defensively. And they got to stay healthy. Even with those guys they acquired, they got to stay healthy. That has not been the case so far. In spring, it wasn't the case to the point where they couldn't practice the way they wanted to. So 10-2, you can tell me, feel free to tell me why you disagree.